Hi, I'm Eric Spenceley. Today I'm going to show you guys how we built this mobile table saw stand on Spenceley Design Co. So we've had this portable rigid contractor table saw for a little while, and overall it's a great saw. It works well, but the thing we hate is this base here. It's super unstable, and since I'm somebody who's taller than a lot of people, it's really low for me. Not to mention underneath there's just a ton of wasted space that could be better utilized, especially in a small shop like this. So to remedy all these issues, what we're going to do is we're going to build a mobile base. This will be much easier to move around, and it'll also have some drawers underneath so we can put things like push sticks, blades, and other table saw accessories. Let's get building.
We had our home center break down our plywood into the rough size we needed for this project since we don't have a pickup truck at the moment. The very first thing we needed to do was cut down the panels to make the case of the stand. And as always, there's a full cut list available on our linked website in the description below. Since our table saw only has a rip capacity of 26 inches, and the other side pieces as well as a few other components of the stand needed to be 28 inches wide, we set these pieces on top of some polystyrene foam insulation on the ground to break down with our circular saw. With the pieces clamped together, they still weren't laying quite flat, so we added a few more pieces of foam underneath the panels and then measured out the final width that we needed the panels to be. We don't have a dedicated track saw yet, so we measured the distance between the blade and the edge of the circular saw base and set a straight edge 4.5 inches off of where we needed to cut. With the blade depth set just below the plywood, we could easily cut this piece down to final width. Now, one tip we found helpful to get chip-free cuts is to use a higher tooth count blade on your circular saw and go slower than you think you should. We then set our fence on the table saw to the depth of the cabinet at 23.5 inches and cut both sides, top and bottom panels down to final dimension. We always have a tendency to drill holes in the wrong place, so we marked out where the pocket holes needed to go and then grabbed our pocket hole jig. We set both the drill collar and the jig itself to accommodate 3/4 inch stock and then drilled all the holes into the top and bottom of both side panels. We have to admit there's something oddly satisfying about measuring out all the spacing between the holes and having perfect symmetry. Oh yeah. We were then ready to assemble the case. We didn't use any glue in case we needed to break this down in the future, and honestly, the pocket screws will be plenty strong enough. Once the side was clamped to the bottom, we checked it for square and drove in all the pocket hole screws to hold the pieces together. Make sure you have the right screws for this project. We are using the 1.25 inch coarse thread that are made specifically for softwoods and plywood. With both sides now attached, we could flip the case over, put the top panel down, and get that perfect alignment, and then drive the rest of the screws in to hold the pieces together. In order to get the back panel to be the exact same size of the case, we set the case up against the blade of the table saw and moved the fence over until it was snugly fit. In a perfect world, this measurement would have been 22.75 inches, but plywood is not exactly 3/4 of an inch thick, so the relative measurement here is crucial to make sure the pieces fit well together. We threw a countersink bit into our cordless drill to create an inset for the head of the screw to hide in, and after attaching 2 adjacent corners, we gave the case some encouragement to bring to square, and then countersink and drove screws to hold the back panel in place. With the case flipped over, we marked out the screw locations for the locking casters, pre-drilled to prevent wood splitting, then used a washer and a lock washer to securely hold the caster to the bottom of the case. These bad boys aren't going anywhere. And at this point, you could be done with the project, but we wanted to add some pull-out drawers. We're going to be making an entire video dedicated to making drawers, so make sure to check that video linked up above. We grabbed the outer segment of our full extension drawer slide and placed a 3/4 inch plywood cutoff to act as a spacer piece to rest the drawer slide on. And after insetting it about 1/16 of an inch from the front of the case, we used the included screws to attach the slide to the case itself. To line the drawers up nicely, we set down a few 1/4 inch plywood scraps to act as spacer pieces, holding the drawer slightly above the bottom of the case, and then inserted the inside of the drawer slide, leaving a small segment sticking out to insert the supplied screw. We then worked our way back, sliding the drawer out just enough until the next screw hole was revealed to fully secure the drawer to the slide. And to attach the next slide, we put down 1/4 inch scrap and 2 3/4 inch scraps and attached the slide as before. While we work our way through the rest of the drawers, we want to remind you to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel so you never miss one of our future videos. We have all kinds of projects coming up, from shop builds, DIY furniture and decor, and even some restoration projects. You definitely won't want to miss what we have coming up. Now that we've got the drawers attached, we need to cut out some false fronts. We first measure the final height of the case and then set our table saw to that exact measurement. And remember one of those scrap pieces that we had left over from the back panel before? Well, this piece is already cut the perfect width, so we just need to dial in the height. This is why you want to go to our website and download those free project plans we were telling you about. With the front piece cut down, we could lay it on the front of the cabinet and mark out where we wanted to cut the drawer fronts. Now, in order to keep the grain flowing down the front of the case, we first numbered out the drawer fronts so we didn't mix them up, and then made a mark on the side where we wanted to make these cuts. Now, the typical table saw blade is 1/8 of an inch, so that will leave the perfect gap between all of the drawers. We didn't really care what the measurement was when cutting the drawer fronts, we just lined the mark that we made up with the blade and made the cut. With the drawer fronts cut down, we could attach them to the drawers by aligning them evenly with the side of the case, clamping them on securely, pre-drilling some holes, and then driving some screws in to hold it securely to the drawer box. We then cut down a 1/8 inch spacer piece from some scrap wood to perfectly space the drawer fronts and continued installing the remaining 2 pieces. With the cabinet complete, we needed to make some drawer pulls, so we found a scrap piece of walnut and sketched out a rough design. If you want, you can always buy drawer pulls instead of making them and completely skip this step. We first cut the block into 3 even pieces, then lowered the blade so it was only cutting about halfway up the block. We made a series of cuts to hog out the middle and then cleaned up the slot with a chisel. Back over at the table saw, we used our crosscut sled and stop block to cut the drawer poles all down to the exact same size. After a quick sanding to remove any saw blade marks, we clamped the poles onto the drawer, pre-drilled, and then drove some screws in to hold the pole securely to the front. And after all the drawer poles were attached, the final thing that we needed to do was attach our table saw. We first aligned it on the case, marked where we needed to drill holes for the attachment bolts, removed the saw, and then drilled all the way through the case top. Just make sure that you don't hit the drawers underneath. Bringing the saw back over, we could grab some bolts and securely fasten the table saw to the stand. And with that, this project is finished.